We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, you have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style, and so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
It's a very interesting question.
The Bubb Report with Dr. Kellon Bubb. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.
Tell as a commissioner of police, tell a politician, back off. You have no knowledge of the law. You have no knowledge of law enforcement. You cannot force my officers to do the wrong thing.
But that is somebody's son. That is somebody's child. That is part of a family. And I think that is the part that they are missing out.
Because E and F are apt to be used oppressively.
It's like because we don't see disabled people as sexual beings, which is ridiculous.
You mean they don't want to listen to your version of science? They have their own science. You have your science.
What we need to do is teach people to think and not what to think.
Today, it's too bad that everybody do what they want.
If I could forgive Bernard Ford, then I could forgive Bob Morris too. And today, on this day, I no more have anything in my heart for what he did.
The education system has to be very fluid and dynamic because we're living in very different and changing times.
Treating all your citizens equally, all your citizens fairly, recognizing each group, not discriminating against one or the other.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah. Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this. So I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bubb Report. We go there.
A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and we welcome you to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. We are happy that you can join us for yet another installment of the Bubb Report. Now, as we promised last week, we were going to be taking a palate cleanser, if you will, from some of the more heavy, although today's program will be heavy in the second segment of the program, but however, it will not be political heavy. We have had some very heavy-hitting programs on the local front in the last few weeks with respect to issues around general elections in Grenada, with respect to issues of Project Polaris, with respect to issues of the political parties getting on an election footing. So many issues that we have addressed on the program, but we are now going to be switching gears and getting into the carnival and heritage mode, if you will. Normally at this time of year, the Bubb Report dedicates its programming to Emancipation Day celebrations and commemorations. And on this program today, we'd also have a segment on the Ifa Festival that's happening in Grenada as well. But more importantly, well, I mean, all of these are very important activities for us as well. Carnival is also right around the corner, which is, of course, Grenada's mainstay cultural marquee event of this time of year. So we'll be having a lot of carnival programming as well occurring at this time of year too. So stay tuned for that. And I do hope to see many of you in Grenada for Carnival. And speaking of Carnival and culture, before we get into this week's editorial, yesterday was the inaugural Grenada Day celebrations here in the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan area. And we did have an opportunity for Grenadians to come out and really celebrate everything Grenadian at the Grenada Day event that was held in Severn, Maryland. Unfortunately, for the second half of the day's activities, it rained. And as a result, I believe the rain really ended, caused the event to end prematurely. And so we were not able to get some of the cultural performances, some of those artists who journeyed all the way from New York City to be with us. Yesterday, I also had the opportunity to see many of you. Some of you came from Pennsylvania. I met a family who came from Pennsylvania for this event as well. I hope you're listening. It was indeed a pleasure meeting you all there yesterday as well. So again, the Grenada Day had a very Grenada Day, Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia edition. Indeed, it was a very, very successful event. And congratulations to the organizers, Miss Penny, Miss Sonny, and folks of the Nutmeg Alliance who really made this happen. And I know for a fact that they put in a lot of hard work to put Grenada Day on here in the DMV, so that now we do not have to journey to Brooklyn, New York, or to Virginia Beach, or even to Toronto or Montreal, or even in London for Grenada Day activities. We have our Grenada Day right here in Maryland, DC, Virginia. And from all reports, folks were very happy in spite of the damper put on it by the weather. And so again, congratulations to the Nutmeg Alliance and the folks who really worked hard to ensure that the Grenada Day inaugural event in this area was indeed a success. And folks, what we want to do right now is to get into this week's editorial. It's a bit of a somber editorial. Now, it's about Sir Gary Sobers, who was arguably the greatest cricketer there has ever been. He died at the age of 89 in his native Barbados. Now, in 93 test matches for West Indies between 1954 and 1974, he scored 8,032 runs at an average of 57.78 and took 235 wickets at an average of 34.03. Now, fun fact about Sir Gary Sobers, he was born with a sixth finger in each hand, which were later surgically removed, and born to play cricket. By 16, he was already a first-class cricketer. On March 30th, 1954, he made his debut for Team West Indies against England in Kingston, Jamaica, at the tender age of 17. At the time, he was the third youngest debutant in Test history. Originally picked as a left-arm orthodox spinner who could bat usefully down the order, Sobers showed immense promise with the bat from the start. He was dismissed for single-digit scores only 4 times in his first 28 innings. The 1960s belonged to Sobers. He played a starring role in the defining series of that decade, West Indies' 1960-61 tour of Australia, which birthed the Frank Worrell Trophy, scoring an iconic 132 in the tied Test match in Brisbane, Australia, and the match-winning 168 in the third Test in Sydney, Australia. 1966 was Sobers' greatest year, and perhaps the greatest year that any all-rounder cricketer has enjoyed. He was central to West Indies' 3-1 victory in England, scoring 722 runs at 103.14 average and taking 20 wickets, most of them while taking the new ball at 27.25. Sobers was also one of the game's great fielders, a natural athlete with flexible reflexes close to the bat. In the slips, as seen in many of the wonderful replays that we saw over the years. Now, in paying tribute to Sir Gary Sobers, that is Mr. Dr. Didacus Jules, who is the Director General of the OECS Secretariat. He said this, quote, "Gary Sobers was cricket in its most complete form, a batsman of dazzling grace, a bowler of 3 distinct arts, a fielder of pure instinct. His 365 not out stood as the beacon of 36 years. His 6 sixes in a single over remains the sport's most joyful act of daring. 93 tests, more than 8,000 runs, and a captain who led with imagination and pride. Yet his greatness was never measured in numbers alone. Sobers rose from the bayland of Bridgetown in Barbados to the summit of a game his people had once been permitted only to watch in an age of empire and its unraveling. He was living proof that Caribbean brilliance answered to no one. On fields across the world, a Black Caribbean man stood as the best there had ever been, and a scattered region of small islands saw itself reflected in him, unified, confident, and free. And folks, may Sir Gary Sobers' memory be a blessing, and may he rest in peace. And to the people of Barbados, the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Mottley, she led a very stirring tribute to Sir Garfield Sobers, who was declared a national hero of the Republic of Barbados. So we do want to again extend our love and light and solidarity to the people of Barbados for really giving us Sir Gary Sobers, and for his contribution not only to Barbados, but to the Caribbean in general on a sport that was brought by the colonizers, but perfected by the colonized in people of the Caribbean. So folks, what we want to do is to take our first break and come back for the first segment of this program, which will be dedicated to the Ifa Festival that will be taking place in Grenada. Please stand by. folks, we welcome you back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report, and we will get straight into the very first segment of the program. And before we do that, I just want to get a quick roll call. Let us know where you are watching the program from. I see some of the usual suspects are here. Ernesto, Jose is here. We also have Lydia James here. We have Doris Charles, who is here. We have Rochelle, who is here. The rest of you, let us know where you're watching the program from. We have Janine Pascal, who is saying that she's watching from Grenada. We have Karen Williams, who is in Fort Worth, Texas. And closer here in Maryland, we have Diane Mitchell. Diane, it's good to see you on the Bubb Report. Welcome. I did not see you at the Grenada Day yesterday. Samantha and I were there. We have Pat from Brooklyn, Patricia Davis Banjo from Brooklyn. We have here visiting Grenada from Canada, Karen Mary Park. Karen, I hope you have a good time in Grenada, that you're there now. Hopefully I see you when I get there for Carnival. We have Maher Bear, who is watching from Edmonton, Alberta. Lydia Louison is in Montreal. Magdalene Charles is in Brooklyn. We also have Barbara Henry, who's watching us from London. And we have Mr. Kamal of Range Developments there in La Sagesse. Mr. Kamal, it's good to have you on the program today, sir. I hope to see you in Grenada as well when I visit in a few weeks. We have Miss Alma Martin here. Alma, well, we work together back at Grenada Cablevision Community Channel 6, so it's good having you here. Alma, who is joining us from Brooklyn. We have, let's see here, we have Doris Charles, who's watching from Florida. We have G, who is in London. She said London is sunny today. That is a change. We also have Barbara Henry, who's watching us from London as well. Dr. Jocelyn Peters, who is in St. Andrew, Grenada. Akim Lewis, who is in Brooklyn, New York. Amanda Charles in Brooklyn as well. So folks, welcome into the room. Welcome into the room. Today's program is it will be heavy, but not in the way that it has been heavy for the last few weeks. So we do want to get into the very first segment of the program. Here goes. Now, Grenada continues the work of reconnecting the island to its people, the island and its people, that is, to its African roots by way of the staging of the annual Ifa Festival. This year will be the 9th festival. The Ifa Festival is a 7-day event which focuses on one of the principal deities of the Yoruba people. Many Grenadians, if they were to trace their ancestry, can trace their lineage back to the Yoruba people of Nigeria, right? Yoruba is a group of cultures linked by a common language. They occupied an area bounded by the Niger River, and including what is now known as the Benin Republic, southwestern Nigeria, and parts of Togo. Again, it must also be acknowledged that these areas are all artificially drawn colonial borders. Right? When we refer to African countries, I prefer to frame them in the context of tribal regions, in the context of understanding and centering that African identity there. Now, the Ifa Festival in Grenada was organized by Aya Ifatuke, Yvonne Drakes, who was initiated in the spiritual practice of Ifa in 2016. The festival will commence its week of activities with a flambeau march on the 24th of July 2026 at Corinth in St. David, and will conclude on the 31st of July 2026 with an Ngungun parade also in Corinth in St. David. Now, here to make sense of the festival are Dr. Lisely Fitzpatrick, poet and assistant teaching professor in Africana Studies at Wesley College, and Miss Yvonne Drakes, president of the Shrine of the Seven Wonders of Africa in Grenada. Ladies, welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you again, Mother. Is there anything in the introduction that I missed that you want to add?
I'm very happy finally that you are putting us on the program. We
Yes.
have been working very hard towards it. And we're looking forward to a wonderful festival.
Yeah.
One of the things I would like to say this year, we are journeying to Nigeria on the 4th of August, and we are going to the Oshun Festival in Osogbo. And we also will be visiting Ibadan, where we will have a community charity program there for 3 days. So we are really connecting. I'm happy. I'm really happy. I feel very satisfied where Ifa is taking me right now. And I feel very proud of it. And I would like to extend that to my Grenadines family.
Yes.
Embrace your culture, and you will feel how I feel, happy and peaceful.
Yes. And free. And free as well.
And
yes.
Free. And you know,
that is so critical.
It is so critical. The freedom of knowing who you are. It is so important for our young people.
Yes.
We have to educate them as to who they are so they can know where they are going, because we need to get them out of the brainwash.
No, you know? Absolutely. Absolutely.
And this is my goal. This is my life. This is what Ifa sends me to do. And I embraced it with peace, love, and an understanding where Ifa is taking me.
Absolutely. Now, let us talk about the origin and significance of the Ifa faith primarily. You know, again, in the context of colonial and Dr. Fitzpatrick, maybe you can articulate this. In the context of colonial education systems and colonial Christianity, there is a frame of reference for what faith looks like and what faith should look like. Yes? But that frame of reference never centers Africa or never centers anywhere else in the world. So let's start there. And welcome to the show.
Thank you again for having me, and such a spirited and informed introduction. I must say that my heart is extremely full to be a part of this commemorative grounding. And I stand side by side with our Universal Empress and with everything that you do on this network. And I want to make, and I always start like this, to make the fundamental point that Ifa is not a religion or a religion of conversion, but it is a calling and a consciousness. Ifa, in the language, the cosmology, the spirituality of our Yoruba ancestors, siblings, and peoples throughout the diaspora, is the esoteric or the sacred word of the Creator. It contains Ashe, it contains wisdom, guidance, the principles of life. And what happened when you look at the entire history of enslavement and colonialism, there was a concerted effort to disempower African peoples to be able to subjugate them to the vile forms of oppression. And these enslavers and oppressors and the vestiges and the progenies of such did everything to prevent us from fully actualizing who we are as a people. And so they use systems of indoctrination, and I say systems of miseducation, manipulating both religion and education. In the language of Yoruba, right, because we are sensory people, and a dear Nigerian scholar and liver of the way of being, and it aligns very much with how I see Ifa, said that Yoruba cosmology, the way that we exist and live, this is Oye Ronke Oye Womi, said that we do not adhere to worldviews, but world sense. And I say Ifa is the ways in which we use our senses to navigate the world. When we think of our beingness, and in Yoruba, there's a concept and a reality around Ori. Ori is your head, your spiritual and your physical head. We do not do anything without spirits. And Ori is where our sense of sight, hearing, taste, smell, all of these senses converge. And when that becomes manipulated, and as I say, disoriented, we lose our sense of being and direction. And this is the work that we are doing on the ground. So Ifa is a way of being, a way of life and understanding. When you look at Grenada, you look throughout the diaspora, but let's, since we are focusing on Grenada this
On
morning,
Grenada,
but it's
Mm-hmm.
the entire diaspora. Grenada has a high volume of people, which I'm very proud of as a Trinidadian, because we are all interconnected. We are all one. Has the highest volume of people of African heritage. But when we ask, what is your religion? Right? That same 80%, right, will identify as Roman Catholic, Anglican, and you go down the line.
Yeah.
Now, that is intentional. And we talk, and I'm happy that you qualified it by saying colonial religion.
Yes.
Because colonial religion is a manipulation of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? When you look at and if you could even call it the education system, the schools that are considered to be the prestigious schools are the Roman Catholic schools, right? Or the Anglican school, all right?
Yeah.
So guess what happens? In order to matriculate, in order to enter these so-called institutions of learning, you have to identify as Roman Catholic. So there's a self-negation that happens there. Now, I'm saying this to make the point that although that is the case, our cultural resilience need to be acknowledged. So this is the pulse that we are vibrating on, right? So Ifa and what I'm coming to Grenada for is a ritual. It is a celebration. It is a consciousness of self and community.
Very well. And let me bring in Empress now. Empress, before we get into talking about this year's festival in its ninth year, let us talk about your own journey of Ifa enlightenment, if you will.
Wow, that's a big topic.
Yes,
we don't have
very heavy
for my enlightenment. And before I become into Ifa,
yes,
I was brought up as a strong Catholic, very, very much Catholic. But in our home, we were taught very vigorously who we are and what we are and which country we came from. And precisely, we are cultured people. So in a sense, I was not fully brainwashed because my ancestors made sure they identify to us in the house who we are. The drums, the getting into the spirit and all those things. I remember my aunt used to say to me, don't worry, if the drum beat and you fall, it's part of who you are. So I am very much cultured into religion and into my ancestors because I personally was called to baptism from the Catholic Church at 13 years of age. So the ancestors has chosen me a long time ago to walk where I'm walking right now. Still got baptized, vision, everything was precise. And I grew up with all of that, understanding who I am, but with a deep sense of religion and a very deep sense of my culture. And this is where a lot of the ancestors have failed because they did not educate their children as to who they are. So that was a big failure within us. So now we have a greater job of moving that brainwash away. I always say I don't have to be emancipated because I was fully emancipated from a child. Going back into that, I was baptized into the Baptist faith, and I migrated to Canada, and everything was fine. But the time came when I had to walk in the realm of the Spirit. And through that baptism, through getting involved in the Baptist faith, I was sent to Moon. I spent 7 days lying on Mother Earth. This is when my ancestors came to me and gave me the instructions. And from since then, I have been walking. I'm fully qualified. I have my degrees in theology, and I'm fully qualified. I'm a bishop in the faith. I reached to the highest level. I walk a very strong spiritual road. I would not say Baptist or Catholic. I am a spiritual person. And I have learned God is a spirit, and those who serve him must serve him in spirit and in truth. So I understand truly who I am. Initiating an Ifa, for me, was just another degree of my spiritual life. It was a step that the Order du Mari took me closer to him. And so he can teach me. In so doing, I could meet people like Dr. Fitzpatrick. And my alignment with God and Ifa has helped me to align a lot of people who are seeking that true higher calling of spirituality. You see, Christianity is just a word. And to be a Christian, you must be aligned with God. You have to walk side by side with God. So I pay no attention to people who say, I'm a Christian, I'm a Christian. They don't even know the word, what Christian means. So I am very functional. I remember bringing Ifa into Grenada, and I was called all kind of names, but my alignment was so straight with God, I paid no attention. As today, Grenada is being recognized all over for Ifa.
I want you to stick a pin there, Empress, because again, and those are all conditions of mental enslavement. And when Bob Marley said, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, I think one of the examples of that is laid bare is just the very instinctive nature of people of African descent to always resort to an quote unquote obia default if you bring up anything that's African spiritual, right? Or well, if you're a spiritual Baptist, if you're Orisha, if you're Yoruba, then you must be a quote unquote obia person. And again, obia in our context is a pejorative, but that is a colonial pejorative that centers evil. So anything Black and African is evil. That is a symptom of mental enslavement. So I want you to pick up on that kind of prejudice, that type of Afrophobia, as I call it, that you experienced.
Well, I have experienced it and will continue to experience it. I call it demonization of who we are and our culture. And the word obia, if people truly understand, it means blessing. So when somebody says, you're an obia person, I am grateful because you know what? They have just given me a blessing. Because if we understand it, not enough time to understand where Obia came from. Obia came from the word Obi. Obi is used in our culture for connection with the spirit. And when we are doing high spiritual work, we use the Obi to ask questions to ancestors. So in those sense, I pay no attention to that demonization. What I would like to embark on and to bring forward is understanding who we are as African descendants of our ancestors. And we are fighting very, very hard to break through in that realm because of the demonization. Black is no good. If you're black, you're stupid, you know? And that was really, that has really gone through with, you know, it was in my generation. And I'm proud to say I'm 80 years of age. I celebrated my 80th birthday last year. And God has taken me through so many areas to prove to me you are walking with the Spirit. So all this obvious things and stuff like that, that's just for ignorant people who have not taken the time to learn who they are,
right, and
what it really means.
Well, but not only that, and if you ask the average Caribbean Christian, the average colonial Caribbean Christian, to define Obia, they can't define it.
Because they don't
If you
know.
ask the average, because well, and it's because they're singing from the colonial hymn book, the colonial hymn sheet, right? And I use that as a metaphor. But more importantly, I also make the point that if Obia is such an evil and powerful force, how is it Obia was not to be used to topple colonization and slavery for hundreds of years? So you mean to tell me all this Obia that African people of African descent were able to work, that we were not able to work Obia on these criminal human smuggling slave enslavers?
Exactly. And the thing about it is, and if Obia was so great, why most of our people are still in the same positions?
Yeah,
they would be working the Obia to better their lives.
Well, and that's the point. That's the point. If it's such a ubiquitous force, why is it that I can't use it to build several mansions, etc., etc.? But Dr. Fitzpatrick, which brings us to that conversation about first and foremost defining Ifa as a spiritual tradition, one, and also in the context of understanding how Ifa really survived through the criminal transatlantic enslavement period, because that is one of the beautiful things about our ancestral traditions, is that it survived despite colonization's efforts to just get rid of it, to criminalize it, to suppress it. I mean, in Trinidad and Tobago, you had the Spiritual Baptist Ordinance, where spiritual Baptists, and I'm absolutely certain that's on the books in the rest of the Caribbean, because we still have colonial laws on the books, right? So let's talk about that.
So it takes me back to the opening, and I will say this: the enslavers, the colonizers, feared the one thing they could not control, which is the spirit of African peoples. You could shackle the body, as I say, but you cannot shackle spirit. Spirit will always find a way to manifest. Mm-hmm. African spirituality, cosmology is, to use your word, is ubiquitous, universal. It is eco-centered and eco-conscious. It is not an organized religion of conformity, but it is both personal and communal. In order, as I say, to dehumanize a people, to disempower a people, the enslavers attacked the very source of our sense of power. And that is the manipulation of African bodies and psyches. And any attack, and this is during that horrific middle passage of what we call MAFA and its afterlife, if I may say so. The psychic injuries and the physical wounds continue to, and we see it and we hear it, if you are discerning, continue to impede our full sense of consciousness, but not fully. And I would also make the point that it is through African spirituality that we have been able to survive. The depravity, the corruption, the whippings, the floggings. I mean, enslaved Africans and even Africans, because we are aware that you had Africans who came to the Caribbean, Grenada, Trinidad, who were never enslaved, but they were subjected to the same colonial oppressions and that kind of thing. And when we were denied, right, through these criminal acts and laws such as the Obia Act and the spiritual, the shelter prohibition.
The shelter Baptist ordinance. Ordinance, yes.
Right. We found ways, we found clever and clandestine ways of preserving our spirituality. We were forbidden, for example, to read and write in the language of the colonizer. But language is African. In the beginning was the word, and the word was in Africa, if Africa is the cradle of civilization and the birthplace of humankind. When you look towards the African continent, so many languages are spoken. Over 2,000 languages are spoken. There is a reason for that. And our languages are tonal languages. You go through the Caribbean, you go through the Americas, all of the Americas. And we invented language because we are tonal people. So then you have the Creole and the Trinidadian way of speaking and the Grenadian way of speaking, the Jamaican, and you go all up the islands and the region. The American South, the Gullah Geechee, right? These are not broken forms of colonial language. These are African diasporic languages, right? We made something out of nothing and everything at the same time. Because we are ingenious peoples, we are inventive peoples. That is Obia. That is African spirituality at its very core. Ifa is a language. Ifa carries energy, carries, as I said earlier, the principles of life, the guidance of life. Spirituality is where spirit meets ritual, because as African peoples, I think Dr. Bino said it this way, we do not live by flesh alone. And I say spirit and body are inseparable, right? The way that we walk, the way that we talk, the way that we cook, all of that is Obia and Ifa and Winti and Voodoo, all of the things that the oppressors could not control. But because of the violence, because we are sensory people, we are spirited people, we feel pain as intensely as we feel joy. We will feel it even more intensely because we are connected to our senses. So we have within our community, our global community, siblings who are wounded, right? I think you have in the Western way of understanding psyche, you have the post-traumatic syndrome disorder. Within our Black community, you had Dr. DeGroote talking about the post-slavery syndrome, post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Yes.
And I'm looking at the disorientation of African peoples, where the enslavers sought to disembody the African spirit and this spirit the African body. But our spirit continues to be present in everything that we do. What happened? There is a disorientation and a disconnect among some of us because of the floggings, the fear that if I tell my offspring and pass on some of the knowledge verbally, right? Because we have our Nancy stories and proverbs and that kind of thing. But there
Yes.
are families, right? That is all of that is African spirituality. But in certain households, in order for you to, benefit from the social amenities and climb the social ladder in the Caribbean, right? You had to self-negate, and in the US and throughout the diaspora, you had to self-negate. So you had to give up some of your blackness in order to gain. If
The
it's
code switch is real. The code switch is real.
And it is not just code switching, but survival.
Yeah. Survival, yeah.
Right? Survival. And I say there's a difference between struggle and sacrifice. Sacrifice is giving up something that you have. Struggle is being denied what you ought to have. Right? So when you think about the Black African struggle, it's because the enslavers and the colonizers came in, right, to rape and exploit our resources. And when I say resources, I'm talking about human and mineral resources. And it impacted both sides of the Atlantic. And Desmond Tutu popularized South African anti-apartheid activists, human rights activists, popularized an African proverbs because we are replete with sayings throughout the Caribbean, throughout the African diaspora. When the missionaries came, they had the Bible, we had the land. They told us to close our eyes and pray. And when we opened our eyes, they had the land, we had the Bible. That is the essence of deception. Now, Christianity in its purest sense, I am one with Christ, right? Because I understand the meaning of Christ. I'm closer to Christ than you may ever know, imagine. But center to my spirituality is my Africanness. Because African cosmology is universal. So you can be any and everything because we do not discriminate, but we discern the spirit of a person. I was initiated in my mother's womb. I was baptized or christened Anglican. Growing up in Trinidad, went to Catholic school, partake and went to Hindu temple from the time that I was born without confusion, without conflict, because that is the universality of the Creator and Spirit. And that is what Ifa is. Ifa is a consciousness. So that phobia, that Afrophobia, has everything to do with the fact that the enslavers, the colonizers, the oppressors could not control that. Try to control air.
Yeah.
Try to control spirit. It always assumes form, but we need to recognize it and honor it. And that is what Empress is passionately working on. This is my life, my breath, my breathing, right? And we have to walk with her, right? And walk with
on that journey. Yes, absolutely. Let us go on to talk about the week of activities. I will go ahead and share the screen. Again, this is the 9th year of celebration and commemoration in Grenada. And, it's something that I'm so happy that is being done because, again, that is all part of decolonizing practice in the Caribbean, in Trinidad, in the context of Trinidad and Tobago. They have had Spiritual Shelter Baptist Liberation Day. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, under former Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonzalves, who will be the other guest on our program today as well. He also did the same thing in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And so that decolonizing is important. So Empress, we have the schedule here. So if you like, do you want to talk through the week of activities? It begins with the Flambeau March. That goes on, that starts on Friday. That will be on the Friday, 24th of July. So let's start from there.
Oh, I'm so happy because it is one of the favorite thing of my ancestors. The Flambeau March we will start about 7. I'm where I'm at, inviting Grenadians to come out and march, recognize their ancestors, because Grenada is known, before the electric came, it was the flambeau. That is how the ancestors move around. So that is very sacred to us by inviting the ancestors to come in, and we recognize them. We have seen great changes, and that is something that is very dear to me. After that, after the march, we'll be having oil down, we cooking ancestral food. Come and eat, come and enjoy yourself and venerate your ancestors. You know, you doesn't have to be a Shango or whatever. You just have to know there was somebody before you who has paved the way for you to be where you are today. So we are giving honor to those people on Friday night with the flambeau, okay? And on the Saturday, we have what we call, we honor the ancestors by giving them a banquet. We're cooking all the different food that the ancestors would eat, all the drinks and stuff like that. So come out and celebrate with us on that day. And on the Sunday, we have our beloved Dr. Fitzpatrick, who will be educating us quite a bit in depth of our ancestral heritage, of financing, and how we should go about inheriting our ancestors' finances. So we're really looking forward to that, and that would be at the University Center, and we are asking you to come out and give her that support because she's wonderful. You heard her. She knows her stuff, and she would really really tell us what we have to do and how we have to do and how we should carry ourselves as African people. Because some people look at us as we're so beneath, and we're not. But, you know, that's a topic for another day. And then on the Tuesday, we are going to the sea because we understand the mother who controls the sea gives us everything. She's the nation mother. She's known as Yoruba. In the Christian faith, she's known as Saint Anne's, but we know her as Umoja. Some in Ghana, they call her Nana. She is the one that gave birth to the nation. So she's the nation mother, and she is my mother. She's my universal mother. I walk in her footsteps. So come out and enjoy that with us. We also would be having topics on what is Ifa, what is Orisha, and we're going through the whole week of lovely education. This Ifa is educating. Come out and support us and learn something about you in order that you could put an alignment in your life with the spirits.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Mother. Yes.
And on the Friday, we are happy to announce we have the Igungun from Trinidad, the society. They're coming in to celebrate with us. So they will be here. So we will have many Igungun on the street for the procession. Come out and support our heritage. It is so beautiful. It is so peace. It is so satisfactory. And I want to welcome the Trinidad, Ugungun Society, first time coming into Grenada to support us on the Friday on the march with the Ugungun. So there's a lot. There's so much. My heart is full.
Yes, absolutely. And then for the Ifa education, I will go ahead and share that screen here because we do have that symposium that will be happening at that is at the Marisho House, I believe, at the University of the West Indies. Is that where it would be? Yes. So let me go ahead and share that screen there. Just bear with me 1 second here. There we go. As part of the Grenada Ifa Festival 2026. Let me pull that up here. There we go. The second annual symposium, the 26th of July 2026 from 1 to 6 p.m. University of the West Indies Global Campus, H.A. Blaze Street. Feature speaker Dr. Lizelle Fitzpatrick. Topic: Ancestral Wealth, Inheritance and Abundance. That will be moderated by Zoe Smith. I know Zoe. Zoe has an interest in Ifa as well. And special presentations and reflections by practitioners, scholars, and artists. Donations are accepted and appreciated. So that takes care of, and someone is asking, will this be live? Will the symposium be live?
We are working on it. Again, we are asking for donation because we have been doing this festival on our own. This is the first time we are asking, there's people who support us, we are asking for donation. So in order to bring all these things alive, we will be happy for the donation coming in, you know, and we're hoping that it will be live.
Okay, very well.
We are working on it. We are also working on our trip to Nigeria, to the Oshoko Issue Festival. We are hoping to bring that live also. I'm happy to say the alignment with the spirit is beautiful. I'm fully aligned with the Oshun University of Culture. They are the ones who are actually hosting us for this year. So we're hoping to bring you lots of good things coming out from the motherland.
Absolutely. And Dr. Fitzpatrick, I do want to go over to you for some closing comments before we get to the next segment, as well as Empress after. So over to you, Dr. And welcome to Grenada. You know, there are such close cultural connections between Grenada and Trinidad. I'm absolutely certain if you look in your DNA, you will find some Grenadian roots there.
I'm sure she has.
I am sure. Grenada is very dear to me. I landed for the first time I earlier this year that aligned with my birthday, and the tears just flowed. And I know anytime I am arriving at a place that carries immense ancestral power, that happens. But again, I just want to express tremendous gratitude for what is about to happen and what is happening at this very critical point in our evolution. I want to say that it is going to be a spirited occasion, full of just, and when I say wealth, I'm not talking about monetary wealth. I'm talking about wealth of living, of the same liberation that we have been talking about. And the only way that we could truly reap the inheritance that our ancestors have left for us, have cultivated, is being one within ourselves and with each other. So this lineup that we are about to experience is to enrich our spirits as African peoples in the world. I am just heartened and just I don't even have the right words. I shouldn't say the right words, but the words right now to express the immense joy and anticipation for all that is about to happen. And this is not the beginning, it's not the end. It is the middle of something that is meant to be and meant to happen. So it's the unshackling, the unveiling. It's a consciousness. It's not a conversion, but it is a consciousness. And we have always been around, but we had to hide sometimes and be wise with it and smart with it. But I on this note, I want us to, not be afraid of who we are. They are afraid of us, we shouldn't be afraid of ourselves.
Yeah. Absolutely, indeed. Yes, Empress, I'll go over to you for closing comments.
Yes. I just want to give thanks to the great Olodumare for helping us to be where we are today and to express ourselves. And in true expressing ourselves, we are so positive of where we came from that we will be able to pull others in so they can continue the journey when we now become ancestors. I want to thank you personally for having us on today on this auspicious occasion. We just believe this year, our 9th year, and when we look at numbers, I'm not going to go there, we could play with the numbers, is very significant for us in the spirit. And the work is much, it's hard, it's very spiritual. It takes a toll of you because for me personally, I'm always in fasting, seeking direction and asking where to go next because I walk only behind my ancestors. They direct me. So for being where we are today, I just want to give some blessing to you, Bob, and have the ancestors continue to shower you, expose you, work with you, give you the knowledge, like the blessing is overflowing on you because of the exposure that you are working with them, knowing or unknowing they are with you. I just want to give a blessing to Grenada because I know 9 years ago where we are now, we were not there. And I just want to give continuous blessing for the support that we are receiving. We have people coming in from all over. The festival has always been a quiet thing because Grenadians was the Orbia and the this and that, but the people were coming in and supporting. I have spiritual children that comes from all over the world. Every year they are here. And I want to invite my fellow Grenadians, my spiritual children in Grenada, not to be afraid because Orbia is blessing. And the more you work it, the more blessing you would receive. Come out with your Masanto on Friday evening, venerate your ancestors, and they will continue to walk and guide you. Ashe.
Ashe, Ashe, it is. Absolutely. Ashe, Dr. Fitzpatrick, Empress, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report this week. And all the very best for the Ifa Festival. Viewers and listeners, what we want to do is to take a quick break and come back for the second segment of the program. Please stand by.
And so Grenada, working along with the CARICOM heads through CARICOM, will support to the tune of US $500,000, $500,000 US, to be made available to the purchase of supplies, humanitarian supplies and aid to assist Cuba.
It is important to point out that for any country to export fuel to Cuba is legal. And for Cuba to import fuel from any country, well, with the exception of the US because of the economic blockade regulations, but from any other country is legal. What's happening today is that the US is threatening with coercive measures countries that might export fuel to Cuba. And that's the reason why Cuba has not received fuel for a long time.
Viva la amistad entre Cuba y Grenada.
Long live friendship between Cuba and Grenada.
Approximately 3 weeks after the U.S. administration announced the expansion of an existing Cuba-related visa restriction policy that targets forced labor linked to the Cuban labor export program, Foreign Affairs Minister Joseph Andel said Grenada will be standing with Cuba. The announcement on the State Department website said this expanded policy applies to current or former Cuban government officials and other individuals, including foreign government officials, who are believed to be responsible for or involved in the Cuban labor export program, particularly Cuba's overseas medical missions. Addressing the matter in the Parliament while contributing to the 2025 budget debate, the Foreign Affairs Minister said Grenada not only has a legal, moral, and ethical obligation to stand by the people of Cuba, but the island should avoid being opportunistic or transactional as it pertains to the relations between both countries.
Cuba continues to be a trustworthy friend and partner, not only of Grenada, not only of the Caribbean, but of peoples the world over. When the COVID pandemic broke out, Cuban doctors went as far as Italy to provide services. I didn't hear anybody talk about human trafficking or nothing like that.
Informing the House that Grenada as a sovereign state has an obligation to Cuba, Joseph said Cuba, which has had a U.S. embargo since 1962, has provided tremendous help to the island.
Were it not for the selfless support of Cuba, many of us would not have had the opportunities for further education that we got.
He said the island's healthcare system could collapse if the Cuban medical personnel are removed.
Our health infrastructure would collapse without the generous intervention of Cuba. And for that, we must always take a principled stand.
Cherry and Blackman Stephen, GBN News.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And folks, we welcome you back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. We urge you to like and share this week's program if you're just joining us over on our social media platforms. And remember, you can catch repeat episodes of today's program on the Grenada Broadcasting Network television this coming Wednesday, as well as on WPG 10 television this evening at 8 p.m. Now, we want to get straight into this next segment. Cuba is facing an acute humanitarian crisis as the regime in Washington seems determined to bring an end to Communist Party rule since the 1959 Cuban Revolution. A U.S. oil blockade has just put additional pressure on an already fragile economy, resulting in massive blackouts and shortages of food, medicine, and other necessities. On the 4th of June 2026, the regime sanctioned 5 state-linked entities and 5 senior Cuban officials for what they deem, quote, subversive anti-American activities, quote. On the 11th of June 2026, they further punished Cuba's state-owned oil company, CUPET, exposing foreign firms and financial institutions' dealings with Cuba's energy sector to potential secondary sanctions. On the 23rd of June 2026, the U.S. expanded sanctions to 5 additional state-linked entities and 1 member of the Fidel Castro family. This new wave of sanctions has accelerated Havana's economic isolation. Notably, airlines and financial services providers reportedly curtailed operations, while tourism, one of Cuba's principal sources of foreign currency, has been particularly impacted, with decreases in tourism revenue likely to further constrain food, fuel, and medical imports. Faced with U.S. pressure and growing economic crisis, the president of Cuba recently announced a package of economic reforms aimed at expanding private sector activity, attracting foreign investment, and allowing greater autonomy for state-owned companies. The economic reform proposals are the most ambitious restructuring of the Cuban economy in decades and raise hopes of more serious diplomacy with the United States, although the foreign minister on the 30th of June this year said talks with Washington are showing absolutely no progress. So how are Cuba's allies in the Caribbean and North America responding to all of this? On the 26th to the 30th of May of this year, the Institute of the Black World of the 21st Century's Pan-African Unity Dialogue, under the leadership of Dr. Ron Daniels, a longtime freedom fighter in the liberation struggle, led a 25-member delegation to Cuba for an educational, humanitarian, and fact-finding mission. The goal of the emergency fact-finding delegation for mutual solidarity and engagement was to obtain a first-hand view of the impact of the US-imposed blockade on the Cuban nation. In Grenada, the Cuba-Grenada Solidarity Fund, the Cuba-Grenada Friendship Society, under a solidarity fundraising fund, crossed a landmark of $200,000, with all expenses already paid from several fundraising activity held throughout Grenada over the last 3 months. Activities included a dinner, concert, breakfast, 3 breakfasts in the town of St. George, one at Mount Morris, at the Mount Morris breakfast, and one at St. Paul's, as well as a health fair in St. George's, a raffle, barbecue, and motorcade in St. Patrick, a soiree for Cuba in St. Andrew, 2 back-to-back breakfasts, and a raffle in the parish of St. David, and collections in churches throughout Grenada, CARICOM, and Petite Martinique. The 2 single largest collections came from the Roman Catholic and Seventh-day Adventist churches, respectively, enabling deposits to the bank accounts in the amounts of over 61,000 and 33,000 EC dollars, respectively. Contributions have been received from the Methodist and Presbyterian churches as well. More monies are expected from the churches within the next 7 days, as efforts now focus on getting humanitarian supplies to Cuba. The dinner for Cuba at the Grenada Trade Center on the 6th of May, and the soiree for Cuba at the Rainbow Inn in St. Andrew on the 15th of May, together raised net profits of just over 50,000 EC dollars. The solidarity events kicked off with a media briefing in April 2026, as well as an appearance on this platform. And Cuba also celebrated 47 years of diplomatic ties on the 14th of April. Now, the government of Grenada has also confirmed this contribution of 500,000 US dollars as part of the CARICOM approved initiative to support the Cuban people amid their current difficulties. And we are joined now by a very important panel on the state of Cuba. We welcome former Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonzalves. We also welcome Dr. Ron Daniels of the Institute of the Black World of the 21st Century, who led a fact-finding mission to Cuba. We're also joined by Professor James Early, as well as Mr. Chester Humphrey from Grenada as well, who's joining us. Chester Humphrey is a part of the Grenada Cuba Solidarity Association in Grenada. Gentlemen, welcome to this very important edition of the Bubb Report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
I'm happy to be here with you, my brother Kellon, and it's good to see my other comrades. Ron, I saw you last a few weeks ago in Accra.
That's right. You're my favorite prime minister. I was going to leave with that. That's for sure. Comrade Ralph.
Good to see you, my brother, and my dear comrade.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, gentlemen, and the reason why and again, I want to thank Comrade Chester Humphrey from Grenada for also mobilizing a very busy Dr. Ralph Gonzalves, and Paul and Patterson for assisting us with mobilizing Comrade Early as well. We understand that you had some personal challenges, but we're happy that you can be here with us today, sir. But we want to begin with the fact-finding mission. As I articulated in the context of Grenada, there has been a lot of solidarity work happening. But Dr. Daniels and Dr. Early, I want to begin with you, gentlemen, to talk about the fact-finding mission that you led to Cuba. And Professor Early, I want to begin with you because I know you've been doing a lot of work on the ground there as well.
Thank you very much. I've been traveling to Cuba for well over 50 years, and most recently through our work under the aegis of Dr. Ron Daniels of the Institute of the Black World and the Pan-African Unity Dialogue, we organized 25, what I would call mainstream African Americans, not typically seen in the sort of formal left solidarity movements, to go to Cuba. A quick summary is that according to the Cubans, meeting with President Diaz-Canales, meeting with Esteban Lazo, the head of the National Assembly, meeting with various representatives from Cuban civil society, particularly Afro-Cubans. This is the worst situation in the history of the Cuban Revolution, including the fall of the Soviet Union, in which much of Cuba's economic stability relationships existed at that time. We are seeing a virtual strangulation. One would even need to consider this as a slow genocide of starving the Cuban people, which was the beginning process of U.S. imperial disagreement with Cuba and an attempt to overturn the Cuban Revolution, starting with the Eisenhower administration in 1961, in which the first thing that they did was to embargo oil. So we are right back at the point of the beginning of the Cuban Revolution and the U.S. refusal to recognize the self-determination and sovereignty of the Cuban people to organize their lives according to their own democratic processes and their chosen prospect of a socialist economy, a socialist republic, which is redound not only to the benefit of the most oppressed and exploited historically within Cuba, particularly Afro-Cubans, but which has redounded to the benefit of the entire world. The war against apartheid, in which the Cubans were invited in, and when asked to leave, they left with no oil, no minerals, but with a great contribution to humanity. With regard to the production of Cuban doctors all around the world, as has been pointed out in the case of Grenada, in which there could be a collapse of the medical situation there in the absence of Cubans. So this is an urgent moment, which not only for civil society to stand forth and make its contributions, but for civil society to put pressure on our stewards of governance. Cuba needs to be a formal member in the international arena of state power, in which over the centuries since post-World War II, countries have arrived at forms of handling mutual agreements and handling respectfully and in peace disagreements, so that I urge citizens throughout the Caribbean, and particularly in their familial relationships and political relationships to what is called Black America, in which the Caribbean has historically and contemporarily been a major aspect to inform what we call Black America, to put pressure on our stewards of governance, as we are doing here with the Institute of the Black World Project, which Dr. Ron Daniels will talk more about, how then we are unfolding our fact-finding to influence the stewards of governance here in the United States.
Yes, Dr. Daniels, you held a press conference at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., which I attended. And we reported out initially some of the work, but if based on the fact-finding mission that occurred, what was some of the most important takeaways for you from the fact-finding mission?
Well, I'd be delighted to do that, but this is a matter of personal privilege. Let me just make one point, particularly
yes, sir.
As it relates to Comrade Ralph. You will recall at the press conference, there was a gentleman who presided. His name was Louis Romaine.
Yes.
He was the presider. And Louis Romaine was among 4 young people who came to a roundtable discussion with Comrade Ralph in Brooklyn. He may not recall this, 4 young people. And he was so impressed with that. And he's hung with the Institute of the Black World 21st Century. And there you saw him standing also that presiding over the press conference, and also played a key role in our delegations that we've taken to Cuba as well. I mean, to Grenada as well. So I just wanted to make that point.
I remember the event well, and I remember him.
Right. So anyway, let me just say this, that
yes,
particularly under the guidance of James Early, who again is a close advisor. I must also say to Danny Glover, who has been somebody who has been a key leader, particularly with Afro descendants and for progressive regimes throughout the hemisphere. We made a decision to take a slightly different kind of delegation. That is not no disparaging of any other kind of delegation. We really wanted to bring folk who maybe had not experienced Cuba before, from civil rights organizations, professional organizations like the social workers and whatnot. And it was an exhilarating experience. And what we saw, particularly on the heels of a visit by Congresswoman Jaya Paul and Congressman Jonathan Jackson, with whom I have a very close relationship, given my relationship with Reverend Jesse Jackson, as well as the Rainbow Push Coalition. What we saw was, as James described, it was excruciating. It was terrible. It was unconscionable to see what was being done in terms of what might be described as collective punishment. And out of that experience, and we had an opportunity, and there was no censorship. Nobody could tell anybody where to go. It was not government sponsored. And we had conversations all over Havana with all kinds of people, debates and discussions and whatnot. But at the end of the day, what we concluded was something that Congressman Jonathan Jackson said at the press conference. You know, because this whole thing about the communist scare, well, they're communists and they're this and they're that. And he pointed out, he said, well, you know, President Trump has just met with President Xi from China. They have a communist government. And that he's just, you know, obviously is a great admirer of Putin. And that's a communist government. The point is that obviously communism is not the question. It is a matter of singling out this particular regime and punishing them. And I think one of our determinations coming out of that was the notion that President Obama and President Raul Castro came to, the normalization of relations, that people do not have to agree with everything that's going on in Cuba, but the civilized way in which to handle this is simply to agree on what we agree, break the blockade and the sanctions, and then we can debate and discuss the things we disagree about. But that's not the way the United States government has approached Cuba for all these many years. It has been punishment after punishment after punishment after punishment. And so it's really now time for all of those people throughout the world who have benefited from Cuba's tremendous humanitarian spirit and solidarity all over the world, as has been just mentioned in terms of Grenada. And we look at, for example, the Battle of Quito Coronel that broke the back of apartheid with the defeat of the South African Defense Forces and so forth. So nations like Angola, you know, need to be standing up in this moment. But what we intend to do quickly in the United States is two things. We have two lanes. One is a humanitarian assistance lane, part of which was already carved out by an outstanding leader, faith leader, Reverend Lucius Walker, who used to do caravans, pastors for peace, for years and years and years. He came to be someone dearly beloved by Fidel himself, and there's a monument to him that we were able to go and see in the heart of Havana as well. So we are going to be raising humanitarian assistance through that lane of all kinds, the social workers, the psychiatrists, the psychologists, various organizations. And that will begin almost immediately. The second lane, however, is a political lane. We are determined to break the back of the chokehold of the Cubans in Florida on U.S. policy. And what do I mean by that? We know that every presidential candidate has been fearful of doing anything around lifting the embargo and the sanctions for fear that in the electoral map, which is the peculiarities of U.S. politics, they might lose the presidency. But what we're determined to do this time is mobilize and organize the black vote and the rainbow vote, so to speak, in many different states in such a way that no longer will presidential candidates be dependent solely on Florida. In fact, we intend to liberate Florida from the grip of these reactionaries who want to go back to the good old days of mobsters and the Batista regime and the Batista dictatorship. That will take some serious organizing. So among other things, we intend to have Reverend Al Sharpton, who's head of the National Action Network, has agreed that he will be leading a delegation right after the March on Washington to Cuba with civil rights leaders as well. And he will come back and lead a rally in Florida for that matter. And then we're going on to the Congressional Black Caucus, where we'll have, for the first time, a major focus and major emphasis on Cuba. Others will be going. Hopefully, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke will be going. Black state legislators will be going. And people will ask the question, well, why are all of these people going, having people already seen enough? And I was impressed, and James can verify this. We had a very, very moving luncheon meeting with the Cuban ambassador, and we shared ideas and talked to her about what we were doing. And I asked her, well, why should Yvette Clarke come? Why should legislators come? She said, because it is giving the people hope. And I believe in hope. Jesse Jackson has a phrase, keep hope alive, and that is not a trite phrase. The hopeless people do not struggle. The people who have hope will struggle. They will fight beyond their suffering in order to hang on. So we want to keep hope alive, if you will, by having people go and to see and witness, but also to be seen in solidarity with the Cuban people who have given so much to the Black world and to humanity. So in a nutshell, that is kind of what our strategy looks like. And a part of that will be a major presence at the forthcoming Congressional Black Caucus weekend, which is about the third weekend
in September.
Yes.
And speaking of keeping hope alive, Honorable Chester Humphrey from Grenada, Grenada has been doing their part to keep hope alive for the Cuban people. So can you talk to, and I referenced it in the intro, Mr. Humphrey, the work that Friends of Cuba has been doing in Grenada. There have been several fundraising efforts over the last few months, very successful efforts. So can you talk about how Grenada, at least the Grenadian government as well as civil society in Grenada, was able to rise to the occasion to give that support, that solidarity to Cuba?
Well, first of all, let me just extend greetings to Daniels, Earl, and of course, Comrade Ralph, my beloved comrade for many, many, many years. Let me say, I can't speak for or on behalf of the Grenada government. I have no connection with the government, actually. In fact, I am somewhat perplexed by recent issues involving the state of Grenada, its representation at the United Nations, the fact that Grenada refrained from casting a vote on a very vital piece of a resolution that has come on behalf of Cuba. There's been no official explanation. So I'm not in a position really to speak or attempt to speak on behalf of the Grenada government.
Yes.
Secondly, the organization Citizens for Cuba is but one element of a very broad pro-Cuban solidarity movement made up of just ordinary citizens right across the board. Grenada has a peculiar affection for Cuba and for Cubans. There's quite a large Cuban community here that has been integrated within our society. Grenada has been very grateful. But this organization, Citizens for Cuba, under the chairmanship of King's Counsel Ruggles Ferguson and several others, a broad-based organization brought together, including the religious community, faith-based organizations, trade unions. And you think, I mean, we jettison any consideration of local politics or any consideration of ideology. We were just focusing on the fact that Cuba has given so much to Grenada and has given so much to peoples of African descent and has contributed so much humanity to the rest of the world that in this period of war, and let us be clear on this, we are too soft in terms of the language that we use to describe what the United States is doing. The United States has declared an illegal war against the government and people of Cuba. This is what is happening. And we have to see it in its historic context. While Cuba is the immediate aim of this spear of thrust, we have to understand what the American Republic is. Oftentimes under the Biden administration, when the Americans are caught doing things that bleed the human heart. He would use a phrase, "This is not who we are." But America is precisely what you were saying.
Yes.
People make a distillation and distill Trump and focuses on Trump. But this is the American Republic. The American Republic, as Comrade Ralph would say, was founded and built on native genocide and African enslavement, right? So when you see the policy that you see now is not a new component part, it's not a Trump policy, it's an American policy, and it has got to do with how the American ruling class engages with the world. And for those who would have visited Cuba and can see the bleed of the Cuban people, the inhumanity, the death of children because of lack of medical care and no electricity. This is a modern world. The world is built on electricity, on electric power. And if you deny people of that, it's like starving a people. But this is the America. What America is doing to Cuba, it's no different from what it is doing in Palestine. So let's be clear on that. And let me spend a word here, Dr. Bubb, because in your introduction, you fell prey to part of the American global psychology, and you refer to Cuba as communist Cuba. Why do you find it necessary to emphasize or to put in the modern discourse that we are having on the bleed against the Cuban people? Why is it necessary to interject an American description? Because what's happening in Cuba today has nothing to do with communism. It simply has to do with the choice of an alternative system that presents a threat to the American ruling class. And given its decline in the world today, it's becoming more and more desperate. Its fig leaf of humanism is being stripped off, and you can see it. People try to compare Biden and Trump and to say, well, Trump was better than Biden was better than Trump. Really?
No.
The bombs that were killing thousands of children, women buried under, and even today, the open execution of infants by the Zionists. Zionism is but an arm of the American imperialist state. They're not separate things. You know, and unless and until we come to that understanding, we will fall into the trap of using descriptive words which provoke in a subliminal way and diminishes the empathy, because people who are ill-informed and unread, once they hear communism, so we, as journalists, really.
That is a very important. That is a very important acknowledgement.
That's why
yes.
I'm spending time on it. I'm not making.
Yes.
It's not a personal criticism.
No. Of course not. I'm aware. I'm aware.
Yes.
Right.
So this is what I'm saying to you. In a period like this, especially journalists like yourself, we've got to be careful with the language that we use, and that we don't repeat the conditional language that's been imposed on our consciousness and our subconsciousness by US imperialism, which is nothing other than an extension of British colonialism. And if you notice, all of Western Europe now are all ganging up. And the reason why is because Western Europe is losing its place in the world, right? And therefore, their reliance on the militarism of the United States in order to perpetuate the survival of Western Europe, right, is now at risk. And what are they doing? They're preparing now to rearm Germany, right? So we have to see all these things in a broader context. We have to see, well, I shouldn't go there because anyway. So, but these are just my initial expressions.
Yes, absolutely.
Coming back to Grenada.
Yes, coming back to Grenada, please. Yes, Mr. Humphrey.
Yeah, we have had, and I mean, I was not surprised. When the Grenada government was contemplating the radar business, they have gotten credit for not making the decision, but they couldn't make the decision because it presented a risk to the electoral chances, because the population of Grenada, significantly conscious, although our consciousness have declined with the collapse of the revolution and the peculiar circumstances within which we find ourselves, and the way in which mass propaganda and reconditioning the minds of African people is uppermost now, right? And if you look at all the bans imposed by the Trump component of the American ruling class, you'll notice how Afrocentric those activities are, focusing on Africa, you know, and there are good reasons for this, which maybe this program may discuss en passant, but it's not the central part of the program. But coming back to Cuba, Cuba has a place in the hearts, in the memories, in the thinking, in the feeling, in the culture of the Grenadian people. And not just because of the Cuban Revolution, which reinforced those things, because as you know, there's a long history of relationship between the Cuban state prior to the revolution and places like Grenada, right? When many Grenadians went to Cuba, again, to cut cane. Many Grenadians went to Cuba in order to work. Many Grenadians met Cubans in Panama during the building of the Panama Canal. So we have this, and of course, the memory of Morris Bishop, which is always present in the minds of Grenadians, right? And the opening up and the amount of help that Grenada has gotten in its transformative component parts, especially in education, in the wide sway of professionals that Cuba has helped us to develop and so on. All of these things are seeds well planted. And this is what the Trump regime is trying to unroot. And sadly enough, I'm very disappointed of the new political class that has come to the fore in the Caribbean and how they're scampering and running. Look, struggle requires sacrifice. There could be no struggle. There has never been and will never be. Struggle for a better world, a better place for greater and social equality that does not require sacrifice. It just does not happen. They're synonymous.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's running and hiding and ducking and dodging. Who are we fooling? Who are we fooling? I don't know. It's really shameful. It's shameful that the state, which moved in the 60s, led by Dr. Eric Williams, to decolonize and to put a limit on American imperialism and to put a limit on British colonial state that is allow the Americans to establish a base in Chaguaramas and in the Trinidad territory. I mean, it is heartbreaking how history is turned on its head, that today we now have a prime minister in Port of Spain who has done everything to buckle history, everything to turn history on its head. I mean, what a shame. What a shame and a disgrace that we face with the current political class and those who wish to sell out the American imperialism and the last breath of British colonialism and the cold shoulder approach they give to the reparations movement.
Yeah.
And here again, I want to take my hat off to Comrade Ralph.
Yes,
I want to take my hat off to Comrade Ralph and the work that he is doing. He has not, he's out of office, but he's still in power. Ralph belongs to the people. And wherever the people's struggle is, you will find him there. And he's there playing his role, right? I mean, we know all age revolutionaries, but for a revolution never stops.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Al Gonzalves, so welcome back to the Bubb Report. It's always a pleasure having you, sir. And again,
I'm happy to be here with you and my dear comrades and friends.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
I see you beautifully attired. You're a wonderful young man. I see you beautifully attired this morning.
Yes, comrade. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. But comrade, I want you to bring all of this together in respect of today's conversation in the context of CARICOM and in the context of internationalist solidarity, because that is also very important. And that is something in the context of non-aligned history and global South movements, that solidarity has always been critical. And Cuba has been such an important connective tissue as part of that.
Yes. It is clear from the beginning that American imperialism was not interested in having an alternative system on their doorstep. That is to say, a system based on a set of principles which were anti-capitalist and which were socialistic in nature and people-centered. And from the very beginning, they sought to subvert, American imperialism sought to subvert the Cuban Revolution. And the history is well known. And that continues today. And we have reached the highest point, I believe, since the Cuban Revolution, where there is an articulated framework just put out last year by President Trump, the national security document, where they talked about a new Monroe Doctrine, or at least the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. Because the Monroe Doctrine has always been central to U.S. foreign policy in our part of the hemisphere. And at various times, they would seek to ameliorate it, to soften it. But Trump has brought it back with great force. But all the speakers before are correct, that Republican and Democratic administrations in the U.S. have carried out this anti-Cuba policy, anti-revolution Cuban policy. And what do we see as where the sources here? First of all, the arrogance of American power and American imperialism, which I hinted to. Then the material interests which derived hitherto from the United States, by the United States of America, from exploiting Cuban resources. And then in the contemporary period, it is clear that Republicans and Democrats, their policies in relation to Cuba are partly determined by presidential politics of South Florida. The large size of the Cuban emigres and their vote, though they're not a homogeneous body, they constitute important voting base for those who want to run a policy against the Cuban regime. I think that we have to try to understand this. Why is it that Trump is carrying this thing worse than ever before? In 2014, December 2014, President Obama realized that after 50 or so years, that the policy didn't make any sense. The policy of having the United States of America and Cuba being perpetual enemies, that a rapprochement should be worked out. And then, unfortunately, President Biden didn't act to deepen this particular process. Indeed, the first Trump administration rolled back many of the initiatives of the Obama, Raul Castro détente. And then Biden simply stayed in the lane with Trump. And Trump in this new period has made matters worse. What they're doing in Cuba right now, it's a crime against humanity. And the national security strategy of the United States of America, and is very much articulated not only by Trump, but people like Stephen Miller, who hold a prominent position in the White House, and he wouldn't deny this. He would say, yeah. And Marco Rubio, where they're going to the point now that they want to overthrow, they want a regime change in Cuba, and being emboldened by what took place with the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. But as U.S. imperialism is finding out, Iran is a different thing than Venezuela, and so to Cuba. They're not on all fours at all. And if the current policies are pursued to the limit as to where they want it, the American imperialism wants its policies to go to overthrow the Cuban government. You have a lot of dead people, dead Americans who are going to go in, and dead Cubans. And it's completely unacceptable in our part of the world. The Caribbean is a zone of peace. To have this perpetual war being raised against our Cuban brothers and sisters, who above all things are Caribbean people. Now, the change in structure of global capitalism from a system where there was a great deal of connection to production, but you have had the financialization of capitalism, and a set of hustlers have grown up among the international capitalist class. That what you're having is a kind of lumpen bourgeoisie, international bourgeoisie, and where they're seeking to normalize all kinds of illicit criminal activities, and they're driving a horse and chariot through the Charter of the United Nations, and they're very hypocritical, more so than ever before. And I think part of this, as I say, is the very change in structure of global capitalism. And of course, in a wider sense, that in the United States of America, where you have a contradiction in the soul of that country. They say that they're a land of freedom and liberty and democracy, but they strive, the ruling classes strive all the time to maintain it as a white republic. But they're unable to maintain it as a white republic because of the inheritances of the enslavement of African bodies, and of course migration, which is part of the global trend in the world, and particularly in the modern world of global monopoly capitalism. So they're seeking, in a sense, to pursue policies which are illusory. They're in quest of a world which never was, and they're seeking to create in their heads these hustlers, these criminals, who have grown out of monopoly capitalism, and conjoined also with issues relating to ethnicity and so forth. But they're looking for a world which is in their heads, which really never was, and which is not going to be. And this is where the problem is so acute in the case of Cuba, because they're seeking to starve a nation into submission. It's one of the tools of a hustling form of capitalism, which degenerates easily into fascism, or whatever its democratic shell. No, Chester is right about the responses which we have had to imperialism in the current period, and particularly in relation to Cuba. I want to commend the governments for keeping the issue alive of the necessity and desirability of defending Cuba's independence and Cuba's sovereignty. But I think it would be fair to say that the responses have been inadequate, have been insufficient. And we need to persuade our governments in the Caribbean and in Latin America, and in Africa too, other parts of the world, that the response needs to be more focused and to be more robust. There are several small things which are being done, but there's no. We don't see a global campaign in defense of Cuba to bring all the anti-imperialist forces and all the democratic forces which would say to the United States of America, look, what you're doing is plain wrong. It's inhumane. And we have to build that. Of course, there are many things which immediately of a humanitarian nature, which we can do far more than we are doing. In the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I suggested that we had, when I was Prime Minister, which we did, we have a rice mill here, we have a flour mill to send shiploads of rice and flour to Cuba. We, instead of Cuba requiring Cuba to send monies to the various embassies they have in every single country in the Caribbean, we must provide interest-free loans on an annualized basis to the Cuban government so that these embassies can be properly maintained. The Cuban embassies I'm talking about, in addition to making actual financial contribution. I don't think anywhere the financial contributions are anywhere close enough. I must say the contribution of Grenada, the announced contribution of Grenada of 500,000 US is one of the larger ones. And again, I commend those who have done that. Now, if you may permit me,
yes,
we need. I wrote. I can't say everything about this issue here today. There's an essay I have in a book called Our Caribbean and Global Insecurity. It was delivered as a paper in 2015 at the Florida International University, the U.S.-Cuba Accord, How the Caribbean Paved the Way. I just want to read something, a couple of things, to help persons, particularly young persons who are listening, and to see if we can light the fires under them. And those governments who are fearful of Trump, that I have in my life, I have understood that a slave or a servant has a far greater scope of action than they often believe. That we think that the slave master or the overseer or the master in any master-servant relationship, that they have more power than they actually have. And we test the limits when we resist. But if you roll over and play dead, they're always going to come and trample upon you. That is the history. Now, in the 1990s, and Professor Early, my comrade, and Ron would know this, and so to Chester. You know, in the 1990s, there was a man from New Jersey called Robert Torricelli. And there was an act which was passed, putting sanctions on countries which wanted to trade with Cuba. Bill Clinton signed that law, that bill into law. But I want one of the most pro-American leaders at the time, Eugenia Childs of Dominica. This is what she said, because in 1993, the US government put pressure on the CARICOM heads of government conference in the Bahamas. Tell them don't do any trade with Cuba. And this is what Eugenia Childs said. Other people said things, but Chester, I wanted to read what Eugenia said. Eugenia said, the United States must realize that we in CARICOM are independent countries, and in the same way they choose their friends, we must be allowed to choose ours. If they haven't realized that the Cold War is over, we have. I want to read the threat which was sent to that conference by Torricelli, because he was the chair of the Foreign Relations Subcommittee on Western Hemispheric Affairs. And he and several members of the U.S. House of Representatives sent a letter to CARICOM leaders, threatening to deny their countries any future trade concessions if CARICOM didn't rescind their decision to delete the human rights provisions from their agreement with Cuba, because there was the CARICOM was saying, listen, we're not dealing with the debate on human rights becomes so political, so infused with hypocrisy. We're not dealing with that. We're dealing with trade questions. And Torricelli and his representatives wrote this. We had hoped that it would be possible to construct a free trade area in this hemisphere based on our country's shared commitment to democratic values. Regrettably, those of us who have promoted the concept in the Congress must now reconsider our support for it. It simply is not possible for us to support the extension of trade benefits to the Caribbean region if we believe that the ultimate beneficiary will be the Cuban dictatorship. The way they frame the issues then is where they try to frame it now, even worse in the US, in the National Security Strategy document, which was just proclaimed in last year in November. And you should read it.
Yeah.
And we are at a very dangerous place.
We are.
In the world and in the hemisphere. Now, several CARICOM leaders have quite proudly said, look, you're threatening to take away visas, take them away if you want. But you know, we have to educate our people in a way. As Chester knows it, in our Caribbean, from the time the US administration said we are going to take away your US visa or make it difficult for you to get a US visa, everybody begins to run and hide because they think that a US visa to the land of plenty is their way out of difficulties. Of course, it's just a mirage. And all people need to have a greater consciousness, because even those who understand and love Cuba, when the pressure comes, they start to buckle.
Yeah.
And we have to fortify our people, and we have to work together as CARICOM. They can't take out the whole of CARICOM if we work together. And if we are part of a Latin American movement or part of a movement with Africa and with Asia, there has to be a global conference in defense of Cuba. Cuba is too important, a symbol. Cuba, the issues involved are too important for humanity. And all what we are doing is important, but I think we need to carry this thing at another level, and to take advantage of the vast majority of countries at the United Nations who vote every single year against the US
the embargo
blockade. No.
Yeah.
All what we have heard here, I mean, I don't know if young people realize that at the time when the hypocrisy is made about human rights in Cuba, that the Americans were overthrowing a duly elected government on September 11, 1973 in Chile.
Yeah.
That at the time when Angola was fighting for its independence and racist apartheid South Africa was seeking to undermine that independence, the Americans with Kissinger provided weapons to South Africa. But it is the Cubans who went and defeated the South Africans at Cuito Valley. Now, if we cannot, in this period, I understand all the practical problems and pressures that governments face.
Yes.
And I understand how our populations can buckle. But we are not making any concerted attempt to build a global, a Caribbean, a hemispheric, and a global phalanx in support of Cuba. All of us are doing little things in our own way. But this this requires a particular fight against what Chester, I know Marx had spoken about the lumpen proletariat, and Walter Rodney has addressed that in particular context, and Fanon in Algeria and so forth. But there has a reason in the evolution of modern capitalism, a decidedly lumpen element of the international capitalist class, and it's because, in my view, they are disconnected from real production, and they're hustling through the financialization of international capital, and they're normalizing all that is nasty and wicked and murderous. Even journalists now, a journalist asked President Trump the other day, not too long, a few days ago, so tell me, are you in a situation where you can kill all the leaders in Iran, and how many you want to kill? He said, well, yeah, but I don't really want to talk about that now. In other words, it's just normal to kill leaders and kill people and wipe out civilizations. Now, if we don't stand up against this level of barbarism is going to consume the world, and the use of nuclear weapons, Chester, my brother Ron, Earl, and brother Bob, it's going to become normal.
Yes.
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 If I should make an intervention here at this point
Yes.
in time.
Yes.
There's an important factor unfolding of recent vintage. I think it might have been last week, where Rubio launched the campaign against the International Criminal Court to dissolve it. Now, you have to see this. You see, there are many moving parts. And if you focus only on one part, then you don't understand the overall strategic plan and policy.
Absolutely. By the way,
this attempt.
So let me say this on the international court.
Yes.
It is not now. They have been fighting it.
Yeah, but just let me make the point here.
Yes.
That this, and it's all part of the new national security policy. It's all part of the national security policy. And many of us were sick to the vomit when, at the height of the Palestinian Holocaust, unleashed by the Zionists, Trump released an AI image of what a Palestine real estate state would look like. And people were abhorred by it. But it is not the first time. In other words, the capacity for cruelty by the American state and its leaders ought not to be diminished by all of the pronouncements of human rights and the virtues of this and virtues of that. Because as we stand in the world today, the only state in all of human civilization to have used thermonuclear war is the United States.
But I think we're missing.
Yes, Professor Early, jump in, please.
Yeah. In the last 2 days, a report has been leaked that the U.S. military has already laid out a plan for the invasion of Cuba. I'm mindful that the last time that I saw Brother Comrade Gonzalves, Danny Glover, and I was in Venezuela.
Yes.
And what has happened since that time is that we have seen the U.S. break international law and go in and kidnap Nicolas Maduro. So this is an urgent moment to put pressure on those in governance who say they represent the aspiration and the needs of the people, the medical needs of the people. We must realize that this is bigger than the United States. Also, although the United States is at the pivot of a global organization. Marco Rubio in Munich about 4 months ago laid out a recolonization of the global South. He said explicitly that the anti-colonial movement interrupted the civilizing mission of Europe to bring civilization to the world. 2 days ago, Marco Rubio convened countries from around the world, and specifically from Latin America and the Caribbean, against socialism, communism, democratic socialism. That leaves every state power and every population vulnerable to the new global framework in which the United States, not just Donald Trump was an instrument that popped up for a long-standing multi-decade plan of the Heritage Foundation, which is organizing around the world with the right wing in France and Germany, all over Europe, and DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, which is what the colored people of the world, the former colonies of the world that Du Bois talked about in 1903, they are saying they are coming to reorganize all of that. And the Dunroe Doctrine, now updating the 1823 Monroe Doctrine, is to say that this hemisphere, this is the US hemisphere, and you can do nothing without that. So we must lean on our servants of governance in state power. As our brother from Grenada has pointed out, we must be ready to sacrifice, because they are not going to stop circumscribing the sovereignty of all people. And Cuba is the one example post-World War II that has shown that it is possible to be a humane society and to confront one's contradictions internally, whether it's about gender, whether it's about LGBTQT, whether it's about race. President Diaz-Canel, when he came to the presidency, voted by the National Assembly in Cuba now about 10 years ago, established a national commission against racism and discrimination to recognize that this was not only a legacy factor, but it is a factor that is reproduced in Cuban socialism. And not so incidentally, in the last update of the Cuban Constitution, they did not drop, they simply removed the wording of communism, because that is a utopian reach, perhaps for millennia ahead of us. But it is a socialist society in transition. We must recognize that the United States will not permit that. So we need to get Caribbean leaders to unite with Schonbaum to get oil, to unite with Lula to get oil. The sending of rice and solar panels and the like are all very important. But those are unpredictable contributions. State to state relationships are predictable contributions. But we must prepare now to put pressure on the stewards of government, including in the United States of America. And that brings up the Caribbean in particular, because again, so much of quote unquote Black America is really Caribbean US America. Congressman Meeks, Foreign Affairs on the minority side, we need to put pressure on that office. This is not about a personal attack. It is about the position of governance. Jeffries, heading the Democratic Party, with AIPAC money carrying out this genocide against Palestinians. We must put pressure on these positions. These are not personal attacks. These are responsibilities of stewards of governance that are going against the will of the people. And I would venture to say, as an African American, when I look at the Caribbean, with few exceptions, Mia Motley being one of them, the Caribbean is not stepping up in its stewards of governance. And so that it is the citizens of these countries that we must take these people out of power, including in the United States, if they do not meet our needs. So Cuba is in an urgent moment now. We have a megalomaniac, a dictatorship of vulgar capitalists. They've actually built a big ballroom, and they're like hogs feeding at the trough. And they are breaking down all liberal democracy in the United States. It has collapsed the executive branch. It has collapsed the electoral branch and the judicial branch into an executive branch, which is really a dictatorship. A kingship doesn't really capture it. And this is coming from the Heritage Foundation and people, the Federalist Society, that have been for years looking at not only how to take back the public space for a Eurocentric framework in the United States, but really to take back the global context for a re-Europeanization of the world. So it is urgent for Caribbean citizens to put pressure on their stewards of governance, as we are putting pressure on our stewards of governance here in the United States. Because, and I'll stop on this point, when Eisenhower in 1960 cut off oil, you can go online and find the State Department paragraph. It said these people love their revolution, they love their leadership. The only way that you are going to break them away from their leadership is to put economic deprivation on them, to starve them, to starve the sons and daughters of elected officials to turn against their fathers and their mothers and their aunts and uncles who they have voted to represent them. So this is what we're facing, and it is urgent, again, for citizens to manifest this. Keep up your humanitarian aid, but put pressure on your stewards of governance to come together. As our brother Ralph Gonzalves has pointed out, we need these state representatives of power, of authority, and the deployment of economic resources to come together and to determine what sacrifices are they willing to make, because the United States will hit them very, very hard and is hitting them very, very hard.
Dr. Daniels, just before you proceed, I want to bring in Dr. Daniels here. And I want you to respond to a lot of Dr. Gonzalves' comments here, especially with respect to, again, dislodging that power that the Cuban lobby has in the context of its influence over American politics. Because that has been, Professor Early just referenced here, the power that the lobbies have over our Black leaders. And again, I always make the point that identity politics is not effective if you're answering to another master, right? So, let us talk about.
If I may, just before Ron,
yes, please.
To be precise, the lobby in Cuba. I'm talking about the presidential politics in South Florida. Florida is
in Florida. Yes.
After you have the three, Florida is number 3 and number 4 of the electoral college votes. I don't want to elevate the Cuban, those who are lobbying to change Cuba with the Israeli lobby, which is a nationwide thing within the United States of America. But in the case of Cuba, it's done in
South Florida,
in Florida, and the importance of it. And while I say this, I just want to make the point that I know that within the United States of America, there are good and decent people who are prepared, if properly led, to come to the defense of not the system of government in Cuba, but to come to the defense of the right of persons to pursue their own set of policies and to say no to this criminal, this inhumane attempt to starve people into submission, and they're good and decent people who I believe could be mobilized, not those who are clearly ideological.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry.
Dr. Daniels, over to you.
Yes. Let me just say that I spoke maybe too rapidly to begin, but I thought I was pretty clear about this.
Yes.
If there's one thing, and I don't like to, if there's one thing I do is strategy. I understand strategy, and when I talked earlier, I talked about, and Comrade Ralph sort of laid it out in particular, you have to understand the electoral college map in the United States. That is one of the key issues. So when I say, even when our delegation met, because quite frankly, it won't matter very much if in the coming election, if the Democrats don't take the House of Representatives back, and if the Democrats, my aspiration is the Democrats to take the House and the Senate. They're both at play. And they're both at play because, as Reverend Jesse Jackson used to say, there's still a lot, thousands upon thousands of unregistered Black people yet that can be mobilized with the right message and the right mission. So the key is we want to get If we want to challenge Jeffries, fine. We want to challenge Meeks, fine. These are people with whom some of us have direct relationships. I happen to have a very close relationship with Congressman Meeks. We don't always agree on everything, but we work, and James knows this, and we know his staff and whatever. I'm on my way to Washington in 2 days. And a part of what I'll be doing is reinforcing what we're going to do around the Congressional Black Caucus. But the strategy is to educate, to mobilize people who had not normally been working around Cuba. But at the end of the day, it is to massively mobilize the Black vote in order to march on ballot boxes in unprecedented numbers, not only to take back the House, but, and I must say, this is the level I'm disappointed in, and James knows this. I have laid out bold ideas about how to galvanize not just the normal voters, what's called the regular voters, but those who are, who maybe not that excited about it. The kind of voters that Jesse Jackson inspired in 1984 and 1988. The kind of voters that Harold Washington in Chicago inspired, because he inspired people right down to every level. That's what we need. Because looking at the electoral map, I do believe that mobilizing Haitian Americans who are not voting at the level they should, and African Americans and our allies, it seems that Florida is in play. For the first time in 25 years, a Democrat has been elected mayor of Miami. That means that Florida is in play. If we break that one nut alone, frees up presidential candidates to take
the question though, Ron, is this. And I share your view, your own analysis, is that we have had situations before when we had Democrats in the White House, Democrats in the Senate, controlling the Senate, Democrats controlling the House of Representatives. But yet, we have not seen an ease in the relationship between the United States of America and Cuba. So that there's work to be done among those whom we are electing in the United States to make sure that because I mean, when the reversal.
Let me do
yes, yes, Ralph. Let him go ahead.
There are a couple of layers here.
Sure.
First of all, it doesn't. At one level, you had a couple of instances. Obama did go in the face of that. He did.
Yes.
And I must say, and as centrist as Clinton is, you must recall, and he backed away. He backed away. But on the eve of the attack on the brothers of whatever that shooting,
Brothers to the rescue.
Yes.
The brothers to the rescue. Yes.
Brothers to the rescue. Clinton was on the verge of taking a normalization step as well. But that one act, no matter what was responsible for whatever, had him back up. So it doesn't matter that you have Democrats and Republicans. Each of them are still looking to the next election as a practical matter. And as a result, Florida has been that one place. It has been the place you dare not touch for fear that in the competition with the two parties, you might lose. And let me just say, as a practical matter, what does that mean? It means that for whatever the crumbs of reform might be, it does mean one party, that the Republican Party, is opposed to minimum wage, opposed to health care, opposed to a whole series of things. And the other party may not move as far as I want them to move, but they're certainly down for expanding the minimum wage. They're for health care for all and a number of other things that our people actually need. But we're now in a situation where that is about to change. And the people are fired up. We just need to fire them up sufficiently so that we take the House and we take the Senate, and then we're not going to go home. Then we got to be, as James earlier said, in their face, in their grill, saying, you must change the policy. Now, let me just say this, and James, you can attest to this. So far, the Congressional Black Caucus so far has really been strong. They've been strong. Yvette Clarke, in part because she's a daughter of the Caribbean, has been strong. Jonathan Jackson came back with Giant Paul, and they did an editorial in the New York Times, said, this is what we saw. And people are eager to join in this fight. So I'm optimistic that we have an opportunity to break the chokehold once and for all. So I have to be optimistic, but I think that optimism is also backed with data that we intend, and we're not letting up. We're going to be online. We're going to be online for the Congressional Black Caucus. We're going to be front and center in terms of having Cuba for the first time.
Can I make an interjection here?
Yes, Mr. Humphrey, make an interjection, please, if you want to add some context.
I'm agreeing with Ralph that one of the principal weaknesses we face in this time is the whole question of leadership. And I want to suggest very strongly that issues touching and concerning Cuba and its survival, right, has to be integrated in the reparations movement. It cannot be disaggregated out and treated as a different topic. It has to be integrated. So my comrades, I'm urging you that in your reparations intervention.
Log off and log back in.
And I am
Go ahead, Mr. Humphrey.
I am not satisfied that Africa is doing what Africa should do.
I agree with that.
Right? Given the role that Cuba has played in rooting out the last vestiges of colonialism on the African continent, I am saddened by what I see. I think African countries who are much more naturally endowed than the states of the Caribbean can do much more. And I think leadership matters. Leadership matters, Comrade Ralph, you and I know this. Leadership matters. Leadership defines history. It's not the only ingredient, but it's the principal ingredient. And I would like to see a more concerted effort, especially among African states, you know, to rise to the occasion. And Comrade Ralph, if we can build, I mean, after this meeting, I think we should talk. We can have a discourse. But if we can build a new initiative, leaders like yourself, people like myself, in a new initiative to launch this global struggle. I mean, the largest assembly of people of African origin outside of Africa is in Brazil.
Yes.
Right? It's in Brazil. Right? Brazil must come more forcibly to the help and aid of Cuba. I mean, I listened to Lula when he was speaking on the whole initial Trump thing and the new strategic policy and so on. He's very good, right? But we need a leadership platform that has got to be built from the ground up, comrade, and that's the challenge as we enter the last period in our lives, Ralph. This to us is a new struggle. Right? I mean, I can't speak about Cuba and not come close to tears.
Right.
You know, not come close to tears. You know, for what the Cuban people are going through. Yeah. You know, so I think, you know, and I'm very saddened how the African colleagues are playing this game, really. You know, I'm very saddened. It's almost like an abandonment.
Right.
You know, one of the
Dr. Bubb,
yes.
Bubb, I have to
Dr. Daniels, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I have to excuse myself because I'm over time and I have a certain.
Yes, absolutely. But I do want to give you an opportunity for closing comments.
Ron, I heard you did well in London. You were there. You were there. You were at the House of Commons.
Yeah, well, did
you go to the Lords also?
Yeah, I did. Anyway, I'm obligated as an organizer to let people know that they can, in fact, get and see and review the October 26th communique on the IBW website at ibw21.org. I think this has been an extraordinary conversation. I unite with what Comrade Ralph said in terms of building this global movement. James Early can attest to the fact that in the Pan-African Unity Dialogue, one of the first ideas we had was that we thought Angola, of all countries, should be one of the ones to step forward and to have the audacity to say, we're sending a ship. But, you know, all of these things are in play. But once again, I like the idea of the global movement. We're going to be doing what we can do in the United States of America. And Comrade Ralph will be in touch. Chester will be in touch because not only are we doing this work, we're also doing work in Grenada as well. So I appreciate so much the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ron. I want to say this.
Yes,
my
Professor
dear
Daniels,
comrade.
thank you again. Yes.
I want to say this. Unfortunately, when the issue arises of dealing with the barbarism of imperialism in Cuba, swiftly the conversation turns. Well, why the government and people of Cuba, why don't they just simply give up what they stand for and get some food and oil and all the rest of it? And it's amazing. You're putting the burden on people who haven't done anything against anybody other than trying to organize their society as they see fit. And all that they want is for persons, okay, the Americans don't want to trade with Cuba with oil. There is no law, nothing in international law, nothing in commercial law to stop other people from trading with Cuba with oil. But it's the pressure from the United States of America, the weaponization of the dollar, that you can't trade in US dollars, you can't trade in US currency, you're not going to get your visa, you're going to have sanctions against you, we're not going to allow the planes to bring your tourists, and so on and so forth. But we cannot live in a world like this, where you have somebody who is in charge and everybody else is superordinate. That person who is in charge must know that at some time, if that is what you want to do, there will be a rebellion. And rather than doing something which will end in tears, with even greater tears and suffering, begin to have a mature conversation with the Cuban government to seek to resolve problems which you have. A mature conversation without preconditions. The Cubans, I know, are ready for that. And the Americans, I'm urging that they do so for the sake of peace in the hemisphere and to stop this criminal attempt to starve people into submission. And for those of us who are calling for measures to work in favor of the Cuban government, we have to resist the temptation of seeking to blame the person who is being put upon. It's like you're blaming me that my house is on fire, when it's the arsonist who burned down my house.
Right.
Why turn on me and blame me? I didn't light the fire. I was going about my business, trying to make
Brother Ralph, one practical step I want to recommend for Brother Ralph, Brother Patterson in Jamaica, Sister Comrade Mia Motley, although she's in government, there may be some complexities here for those who are in government. But a letter from Caribbean leaders, stewards of governance, former stewards of governance, present stewards of governance, and civil society to Barack Obama to come off the sidelines. After all, he should be acknowledged for entering into a discussion, a respectful discussion of equity with former President Raul Castro in 2014, 2017, in which they actually brought the United States from the sideline of being a rogue nation into the family of nations to respectfully engage in mutual beneficial pursuits, as well as to respectfully and peacefully handle deep ideological, political, and economic differences. We must not let him sit there as a kind of historical progressive, but we need him to step off the sidelines now and say to his colleagues in governance in the United States, stop this inhumane, this barbarous attack on the Cuban people and their sons and daughters who are in governance that they have elected. So please, I ask civil society, former members of government and present members of government in the Caribbean, because we are so interconnected in our African diaspora realities of transnational identities, loyalty to Jamaica, loyalty to New York City, loyalty to Houston, loyalty to Barbados, because we are the ones who are living one of the most important transnational identities in which our laws and our customs are out of sync with our actual daily lives, so that the Caribbean can have a major influence through its citizens, not its immigrants and entities, but through its citizens who have these dual loyalties, who elect members of Congress in the United States, to say to Barack Obama, come off the sidelines, step into the arena with the rest of global humanity to protect Cuba, which is so important not only to the Cuban people, but as we have elaborated here in great detail, it is a concrete expression of what humanity can do. And I would argue that we have no other precedent in modern history, as is the case of little Cuba, although it is the largest republic in the Caribbean. In a world of 8 billion people, these 10, 11 million people have made and continue to make extraordinary contributions. I was just there 3 or 4 weeks ago, and in the midst of being in war footing, as the president has said, he said to us when we met with him in January and when I met with him again in May, that they are on a war footing. But what was Cuba doing when we were there in May? They were holding an international poetry festival. They're always extending where humanity can go, even as they are defending where it has arrived. So I call on our Caribbean sisters and brothers to step forward in this particular.
I want to
Professor
say that
yes, go ahead, Dr. Gonzalves.
The former heads of government of CARICOM made a statement, but I take and we had made certain urgings on the United States government, but I take the point that that Earl is making. We should make a specific démarche to our brother Barack Obama. Because he would still have a great deal of influence in the United States system and globally too. But because we need to stop this, what is happening now, and then what they're planning to go and invade the country and to remove the government. I mean, we're going to have problems in this Caribbean if that were to happen. Additional problems. The number of migrants who are going to end up in Jamaica, who are going to end up in the Bahamas, who are going to end up down here, and you're going to get we're going to get the good, and we get some terrible ones too, and. We're going to get some hardworking people, and we're going to get some counter-revolutionaries. You're going to get all sorts of things. And it's going to be a terrible mess.
Yes, it is.
And fundamentally, what would be happening? If Trump goes to Cuba, invades Cuba for the purpose of removing the government or whatever military actions they take, what is to stop them from going to some other country? Because they don't like your policies? No. And already we have seen them put in threats against democratically elected governments in the region.
Governments in the Caribbean, yeah.
And we have to build an international phalanx against this kind of behavior.
And on that note, comrades, we want to take a quick break and come back for closing comments. We've gone over time, but this is a very important conversation that needed to be had. We will go down memory lane a bit. I had the opportunity to visit Cuba many years ago, hosted by the Grenada Embassy in Cuba. We'll go down memory lane, take a look at how Grenada has been supporting a lot of our Grenadian brothers and sisters.
Former Grenadian politician Clarice Charles.
Right, just bear with me here.
Former Grenadian politician Clarice Charles retired from frontline politics in 2008
as an undefeated incumbent with the new National Party government. Shortly thereafter, Charles was appointed by her boss to represent Grenada as its ambassador to Cuba. I first asked Charles if she misses frontline politics, and this was her response.
And no, I don't like looking back. I am from the revolution. Forward ever, backward never. Yes, when you move out, you move out. You find other things to do, and you put the same energy or more into what you are doing.
The Grenadian emissary has spent much of her time repurposing the island's embassy. It acts as an embassy and as a halfway house for Grenadian nationals who visit Cuba for medical attention and other state business. We arrived at the embassy to a buzz of construction and renovation. The upper floor houses the sick who require outpatient care while in Cuba and whose medical conditions may require extended stays on the island.
I think that doing that for them is not like a privilege that they have. I think it's a necessity, and it is something that the government should continue to do, because as long as Cuba is there, Grenadians will continue to come. There will be students, there will be sick people. You cannot just think that they're going to find a place, and if they don't find a place, they got to come back home. I don't see any sense in that, doing something halfway and then having to go home. They come here, they need emotional support. Sometimes they need financial support. They are anxious, they don't know the language, they're in a different culture. So whatever you do it for humanity. You do it because it is a human thing to do. It is a right of every Grenadian to come to its embassy and get care and attention.
As part of my visits to Cuba, I was able to present a donation of school supplies for the Maurice Bishop School for Special Education. Many of the items were donated by Grenadian nationals in New York. Ambassador Charles welcomed the initiative and encourages Grenadians who visit Cuba from Europe and North America to do the same.
Once they contact the embassy, most of them ask me, what would you like me to bring for you? And I said, no, I don't need you to bring anything for me. I need you to bring some crayons, some drawing books, some plasticine, because there is a school in Cuba called the Maurice Bishop School for Special Education. And these are for the students who are challenged in different ways, mentally and educationally. And it is named after one of our prime ministers. And I think that we can support that school.
Ambassador Charles will have her hands full in the next few months, welcoming another batch of Grenadian students to Havana and facilitating the transfer of sick patients for urgent care. For her, it will be just another day at the office, doing the government's bidding. Reporting from Havana, this is Kellen Bubb. Welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. We do want to thank our panelists who were able to join us this week for this very important roundtable, if you will, virtual roundtable on CARICOM Cuba relations in respect of everything that's, yes, so Professor, just log off and log back in. Professor is having some difficulties with hearing us. But I want to go to St. George's. Comrade Chester Humphrey, I want to go over to you, sir, for some closing comments. And again, thank you for, again, assisting us in facilitating Dr. Ralph Gonzalves today, who has an understandably very busy schedule. So, Mr. Humphrey, over to you, sir, for closing comments.
Well, what I wanted to use the occasion to do is to thank the Grenadian people for their outpouring in a very practical way by the support they have given for the large number of fundraising activities of all types we've had. As we close, we hope to reach the $250,000 mark. And only yesterday, the chairman was at my home, and I was discussing some ideas with him that I have for us to do some continuous things. And given the ideas that have been seeded here, I mean, further discussion would have to take place. Once again, Dr. Bubb, I really want to thank you for promoting these educational programs, giving the people of the Caribbean an opportunity to engage in a healthy discourse that has intellectual depth, brought across with the kind of simplicity that people understand. I would urge my Cuban comrades to keep on keeping on. You know, the situation may look bleak and dim, but there's always a turnaround in the weather. And with perseverance, with continued solidarity, and with the genuineness that the Cuban people have demonstrated, and I am not separating the Cuban people from the government and the party, because the people are not alone. The Cuban party, the one leading the process, right? We have to take our hats on to them. This is a very complex, challenging, and difficult period for a young leadership, right? And all support must be given to them. And we hope that we can survive this period and that Cuba's sovereignty will be protected, and that the Cuban state and Cuba can choose its own path that it has always chosen for the betterment of the people of Cuba and for the way in which the Cuban people share whatever little they have with the rest of humanity. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank the other panelists, Dr. Gonzalves, who at a moment's notice will drop whatever he has to do and come on board, you know? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Professor Early, despite the connectivity issues that we've had, I do want to thank you, sir, for agreeing to speak with us today. And we do hope to have you back so that you can share that wealth of knowledge, especially from an Afro-Cuban context, which I think sometimes is missing in mainstream media narratives of Cuba. But certainly we want to thank you for agreeing to appear on the program. So I'll go over to you, sir, for closing comments.
Thank you very much. I am so pleased to be a part of this exchange. I'm thinking of the Haitian Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, the struggle against apartheid, in which the prime ministers of Barbados and Guyana and Jamaica were involved in facilitating that. The contribution of the Caribbean to global humanity, more Nobel laureates than any place on the face of this earth. How the little Caribbean basin continues to be a linchpin, not only in democratic movements in our Americas, but its contribution to global humanity, whether it's Marcus Garvey with the largest numbers of his organization being expressed in Cuba, all around the world, whether it's Stokely Carmichael Touré, who came to us. There's so many connections. And so the upshot, I think, for this moment in recognizing Cuba's contribution to global humanity in both philosophical and practical terms, is that the Caribbean people connected particularly to Black America and all of its Caribbean and Afro-Latin and African connections has a really important role to play with regard to elected officials here in the United States who live those transnational lives with the Caribbean and with the U.S. And we have laid out some perspectives of really leaning on some of the most important people, one of them being Barack Obama. That is a very practical step that I hope will be taken both by civil society throughout the Caribbean and by current and former stewards of governance. And I want to thank you so much for your initiative. Backwards, never, forward, ever.
Absolutely. Comrade Gonzalves, I know that we have taken up some of your time today, perhaps to be with your wonderful granddaughter, who we love seeing the interaction with you all so much.
in the middle of this program, she came inside. I had to ask her, a mother to hold her because she would have wanted to take over the program. I just want to say, Earl, Chester, you see there's a painting to the side there. You only see the lower part. That's a painting of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And I have some other things around me here of Fidel and Chavez and Morris Bishop and others. because we have had a continuous struggle to live decent lives in freedom, to be determined by ourselves. We are not better than anybody, but nobody is better than us. And we have difficulties and challenges in our Caribbean. And we have not done badly. In fact, we have done fairly well, despite all the legacies of underdevelopment, including those we trace to colonialism, imperialism, to native genocide, and the enslavement of African bodies. And to have now, in this 21st century, the barbarism which we are witnessing in Cuba, inflicted by the United States of America, which is a country of hope and glory. But yet it is involved in this inhumane action. These contradictions have to be brought to the fore. And we have to persuade the good people in the United States of America about what is happening here. But in the meantime, we also have to bring all progressive forces together globally to defend Cuba and to defend oppressed peoples all over the world. There are limits to what, severe limits to the Monroe Doctrine and the Trump corollary in our hemisphere. And we must ensure that those limits are realized by those practitioners of leadership politics in those countries. As I end, I just want to say the subjects today. I mentioned a book earlier, which I've authored, Our Caribbean and Global Insecurity, in which the issue in Cuba is discussed. There's a Case for Caribbean Reparative Justice. There's another volume which I've written. And last year, this one came out, Regional Integration in Our Caribbean. They're all available on Amazon. There are others too. And I say so particularly for the young persons, so that instead of just spending your time on Facebook, I'm not telling you not to spend time on Facebook because you connect with your friends and so forth. But I want you to read seriously. I want you to read seriously, because those of us who have had the good fortune to have gone through this struggle over all the decades, I'm going to be 80 next month, that you need to find out what we have been thinking, what charts, what roads we have charted, what we see for the future, and to assist you in the building, the continuing, the further ennoblement of our Caribbean civilization, including in Haiti and in Cuba. Thank you.
Comrade, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report this week. And I have to make my way to St. Vincent and the Grenadines for your 80th birthday.
Well, when you come to Goss, G-O-I-S-E. That's where I live in the bush.
Good.
I live up here like a Rastaman do with the internet. Ask my brother Dickon, who came here and visited me. And of course, Chester's visited many times. He hasn't come here to Goss yet. Since the elections. He has to come. And the other comrades.
Yes,
All right?
absolutely.
You're always invited.
Yes, absolutely. Comrades, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report this week.
Kellan, before we end, just a reminder to send us the clip, please.
Yes, I will. I absolutely will.
Distribute this through
Distribute accordingly.
Good.
Yes.
And Brother Ralph,
absolutely.
I'll be calling Danny Glover in a moment, and I'll tell him that.
Give him my regards. Give him my love.
I will indeed do that.
Thank you very much. Tell him to come and visit me.
Good.
Tell him to come and spend a few days up in Goss.
In Goss, yes.
In the bush.
In Goss.
Like a Rastaman but with internet.
Yes. I'll come and celebrate my 80th, which is in January, with you.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. All of you.
All right.
Looking great. All right.
Thank
you so much, gentlemen, for appearing on this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Gentlemen, the viewers and listeners, very important conversation there. Getting a sort of a global South as well as a global North African-American perspective. And again, connecting all of the various solidarity movements together with respect to their efforts in responding to the pressure campaign that continues to be inflicted on Cuba by the United States. The decades-old embargo continues to put a ringer in Cuba's development. And in spite of all of the embargo, Cuba has been able to do so much for the world with so very little. Many Grenadians, many Grenadian nationals were catapulted into the middle class as a result of the free medical and professional education they received in Cuba. Many Grenadians' lives were saved by the efforts of Cuban doctors. Many Grenadians' eyesights were restored because of the efforts of Cuban doctors. Many Grenadians undertook life-saving surgery in the People's Republic of Cuba when they were not able to afford to go to the mighty United States because they did not have a visa. Cuba was there to assist. And I myself was able to visit Cuba, and I was able to see firsthand the debilitating impact of the Cuban embargo on that island. And despite of it all, the resilience of the Cuban people really stood out. And what we want to do here, our commitment on the Bubb Report, is to bring light on these issues in a way that really rises above the fray with respect to other mainstream media reporting on this issue. So certainly we want to thank you all, viewers and listeners, for your participation on the program today. And next week on the Bubb Report, it will be a pre-recorded live segment as I will be away. But next week, we'll be having the premiere of Nevis appearing on the Bubb Report so that we can have information from him with respect to developments occurring on the island, the sister island of St. Kitts, the island nation of St. Kitts and Nevis, as well as other developments related to Grenada Carnival. We'll be covering that as well next week on the program. So folks, for those of you over on YouTube, there are 236 of you. At one point, there were close to 300 of you. Please do us a favor before you leave the stream. Just hit that like button. Hit that like button over on the YouTube page. And also, if you're on Facebook, hit that like button as well so that the algorithm can share that with others so others can partake of this very important conversation. So on behalf of the producers of the Bubb Report, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb. We'll see you next week for another installment of the Bubb Report. Take care. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. The Bubb Report is committed to being fearless, balanced, and independent, bringing you the stories that matter most without compromise. Now do us a favor. Remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell so you never miss an update. You can also watch us on GBN TV every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Catch us on WPG10 television every Sunday at 8 p.m. Your support helps us to keep journalism free from bias and influence. And together, we can make sure every voice is heard and every fact is verified. Thanks for watching.